Welcome to the Always On podcast. I am your host, Duncan MacPherson, and on this podcast, our objective is to enable our audience, which are high caliber fee-for-service professionals, to always be working on their business and on themselves, personally and professionally. We've got Elyse Stoner and Angela York from Event Advisors so that we can have a really good conversation about the lost art of client events. You might have noticed there's a renaissance occurring in terms of financial professionals assembling an audience for a particular client event. It was quiet there for a couple of years, but the resurgence is full on, and couldn't be happier to have these two authorities in when it comes to events for financial professionals. So Angela, Elyse, good to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for having us.
Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So we're going to get into a pretty thorough conversation about the why, the how. I want to frame it around what's new when it comes to events, ultimately what's working, and then looking down the road around what's next.
Excellent.
But in keeping with our approach, there's a meaningful impact that comes from events. But what I like about you guys is that there's also a measurable component. We're all aware of McNamara's fallacy, which says if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I mean, there is a place for that, but client events, there's a zen, there's a chemistry that comes from these events just for competitor proofing, rejuvenating appreciation. As I get to know you better, you've actually figured out that there are measurable ROIs that come from a financial professional hosting an event. So why don't we start there?
Absolutely. So we get that we're dealing with people who spend a lot of time in numbers, right? Most financial advisors, if you ask them what they're good at, there are those who are empathy and people, but really it's about numbers. So events throw this curveball because their numbers are hard to track. You talk about ROI and that return on the investment of a simple formula of I spend X and I will make Y. Events don't work that way. There are the fixed costs, but we're also saying you need to measure something, right? Because you're talking about the fallacy there. So our philosophy is we have what we call ROM, which is the return on the moment. We talk about events as a moment. It's a rock in your marketing stream. It's a rock in your business stream. And you should have goals and objectives for that moment. And they don't necessarily have to be, I spent A and made B, because it's about deepening relationships. It's about creating exposure for your firm. It's about whatever those things are. Those are the things that you should be measuring to determine success. I came up with this aha moment several years ago. I was reading a book, which I happen to have sitting right here, called The Power of Moments. We can put a link into the show notes about that. It's by two gentlemen named Dan and Chip Heath. And their whole idea is how do we take ordinary moments and make them powerful? And by putting attention to them. And that spurred this whole thought of how do we take this moment? How do we use it as a measurable so we can determine success?
Okay, excellent. Angela, do you want to supplement that?
Yes, of course. I'd like to provide an example that really brings that to life. So I'll bring a real life example, and then I'll bring an advisor event example to the table. One thing that Chip and Dan Heath bring to the forefront in the book is a day at Disneyland. You want this great trip, this great memory, but throughout the day, your little ones will have meltdowns and they're hungry and the lines are long. And when you look back at that event, you take all those little meltdowns out of the equation and you remember the great experience that you had, the great time that you had, the ears and the rides and the photos. So what that's doing is creating positive event memory. You tend to forget the meltdowns and the hunger and the tantrums and all that. You remember the moment. So let me give you an example of an advisor event. So an advisor wants to build relationships with the female clients, finds out what they want, what interests them. They create a painting party. They can bring their friends. They have a great time. They're all building community, and they take this painting home. Some like their paintings, some don't like their paintings. The advisor hangs it up in their office. Doesn't really want to, but he's doing it to spark that memory. And the client, the prospect, wherever they might be hanging that photo, maybe it's the garage, maybe it's their kitchen, they'll remember that event, and they remember the moment they had. The advisor created that experience. So it really all ties together in building the relationships, creating the know, like, trust. And when we bring it back to the numbers, all that adds to a retention of AUM and an increase in AUM.
Well, and that's cause and effect, right? Good activity will lead to productivity. I often say to advisors, be at peace with the outcomes because there might be a long tail. There might be a bit of a lag before they're actually measurable, but just immerse yourself into the purity of the effort. And let's not forget, I mean, we all know this. This is client retention 101, that the number one reason a client leaves a financial professional is lack of contact. Just the invitation to an event is a touch point. It's a moment of contact. If they attend the event, it's even better. The efficiency of an event, one to many, the opportunity to reach into the inner circle of some of your best clients through an event, excellent. So let's get into some of the tactical. Just to be clear, the two of you run a firm called Event Advisors. So you are a concierge and a coordinator for a financial professional who wants to have an innovative event for their clients. You help them actually implement.
We do, but there's a couple different things that we offer through event advisors. And there is we can plan and implement events, but we recognize that a lot of people will automatically say, well, we have somebody who does that. But you're asking us about what's new in this whole idea of ROM and building what we call strategic events. We actually also coach firms and wholesalers and broker dealers in how to make their events strategic. So it can be anything from content ideas to strategic pieces of an event to follow up and how to make that moment last outside of the room, outside of the Zoom, so that you're using that to build and deepen these relationships. So we have a coaching piece of it. We do have an event planning piece. And then we have another piece that we're working on that would really help the implementers understand and be able to plan strategic events from a marketing point of view.
Yeah, I love the strategic side. And I've been telling advisors for a long time, outsource as much as you can, not only to put more sand in your hourglass, but also to add a degree of predictability to the outcome. Just remove the mystery, get out of the minutia so you can really focus on the parts of the business you enjoy. That would be something to consider. Okay, so let's get into this. What's new? In the realm of event planning, what innovative strategies are you seeing? And what are you suggesting in terms of a framework, an approach, a mindset for financial professionals thinking about getting back into the events side?
I think this whole idea of strategic event planning is new and different. And one of the first things that we talk to our clients about is the why. Why are you doing this event? That's actually how Angela and I met because she's worked in the financial services space for decades. I come from a different event background. And when we started talking about what financial advisors do, I would say, why do they do those events? They've always done them, or they saw another advisor do it, so they thought they would want to give it a try. So we really dig into why they're doing events. And because we are also marketers, we are really focusing on the ideal client. Who is the person that you want to attend that event? What's important to them? We get into the nitty gritty of like, where are we having that event? Is it convenient for them? Is there good parking? So really putting that person front of mind instead of simply saying, I saw another advisor do that, or somebody's telling me I should do a seminar on X. But if your ideal client isn't interested in X, then we encourage our clients to rethink that. So that understanding the why and really focusing on the ideal client. I think another thing that we're finding is this concept of micro events, if you will, um, a dinner for 10 people, or it doesn't have to be 500 people in a room. It doesn't even have to be a dinner. It doesn't have to be in a room. Like, again, understanding your ideal client and creating these moments of connection between you and your firm and them, but also amongst your attendees so that they have, as Angela talked about, this positive emotional memory when they leave, that was a good thing and that was a good piece. The other thing we spend a lot of time on is follow up. And every advisor we talk to, we get that eye roll or yeah, that's the thing I'm not so good with. We're recognizing that by doing well planned and thought out and measurable follow up to receive important feedback, that's information that you can use post event and to deepen those relationships. And as we even say, it's a great tool to figure out what your next event is going to be.
Okay, so the first thing occurred to me there is to professionalize the whole concept of an event, the ramp up, the execution, and the follow up. A good starting point to be strategic would be to use W5. Why? Why are we doing this?
Absolutely.
Who are we doing this for? Ultimately, the 20% who represent 80% of the business, the clients we're trying to competitor proof and replicate. That's a good start. What? What is the theme? Where are we going to host it? When are we going to do it? And of course, the how, getting into the weeds on the structure. The follow-up, it's funny. I had a client way back in the day was going to do a financial event, wanted my feedback. And I said, hey, David Ogilvy, who wrote Ogilvy on Advertising, had a very good mantra. He said, you can't bore someone into buying something. I don't think a client wants to go to a financial event. Maybe they'll go for the dinner, but I think they hire you to make all that go away. So we suggested doing a shredding event in his parking lot. Bring in a shredding truck, invite your clients to bring in their boxes of documentation they want to unload, and tie in a kids component with some activities, face painting, all of that, and tell the clients they can bring family members, but the kids, their cost of admission is to bring a can of food for the food bank. And every time one of the kids brought some food and some brought baskets of food, they got their picture taken with the person doing the face painting. The event was a home run. Everyone loved it. But sending the pictures of the kids, that got as much feedback after the event. So weeks after the event, that created as much buzz as the event itself. I think the concept here is expand your thinking, prime it, prepare it, execute well, and then follow up. That's a good framework. And W5, not a bad way to structure that. Would you agree?
It's a great way to structure it. We actually have what we call the ROM wheel, which we can provide a link to. And it's exactly that. It's strategize, organize, promote, produce, follow up. And it's a wheel because then that follow up is going to lead you into strategizing and doing it all over again. Because it's, again, when you're focused on that ideal client, things like promotion, do they want a printed invitation? Would they prefer an email? Do they think, is it the person who's like, if I see it all over social media, then it must be the thing? Like, understanding and knowing your client to build that excitement. That happens in that promote piece. And that again ties into the whole idea of what are you measuring and why are you doing what you're doing?
But at the end of the day, there's no mystery. You've got a checklist in terms of a progression, make sure nothing slips through the cracks. And again, to get the ROI on the ROM, that's fantastic. Now, Angela, I'm curious. This is my assumption. These are things that I've heard, but after the last few years, there's been a bit of a vacuum around actual meaningful experiences. Everything went virtual, everything was digitized. And now we're coming back into this balance between, yes, high tech, but also high touch. So, what I'm curious about is there's an old saying that the marketplace will actually pay you more to entertain it than to educate it. I've seen it where a financial professional would do an event on education around financial planning, and nobody would sit in the first couple of rows of the event. Everybody would sit in the back. And then they would do another event on whiskey and bourbon or travel. Front
Everyone's in
seats
the
are
front row.
filled. So expand on that dynamic. Your events, do you find a sweet spot there? Where do you go with that thematically?
It's funny that you say that, Duncan. It really boils down to the ideal client of the firm. And that is so important to know. Advisors tend to be a quick start when it comes to event, or they used to be. They want to do an event because they saw it online or another advisor's doing it or their coach recommended it, but it might not be what their ideal client wants. And we say this, and it's really important. It's not about you, the advisor, it's about the client. So if the advisor loves whiskey and cigars or bourbon tasting or golf or wine tasting, that's great. But if the ideal client, they don't drink wine or they don't like cigars or bourbon or golf and they host an event, they're not going to attend, or they're going to sit in the back row and they're not going to be as engaged. It's really important to identify your business goals. And the business goals could be want to develop relationships with the female clients. I want to develop relationships with the next gen. Want to really educate my community. I want to build a community. Whatever the business goals might be, those really need to be seen in the event goals. And the event goals then, when combined with the ideal client, dictate the type of event. So I bring this all up and set the stage because when we were in the pandemic, of course, everything was virtual and everybody was doing the wine tasting where the wine and the cheese showed up at your door and we all logged onto Zoom, or there was trivia night, whatever it might be. And then we started going back into person, but we became experienced in this virtual component. So a lot of questions we were asked is, do we still do virtual events? Do we do in-person events? Do we do both? And the answer is it depends on what your client wants. What a lot of advisors discover during the pandemic, and we did virtual events, is some of their top clients were not in their geographical area. So they were now exposed to this event marketing program that they didn't normally get to participate in. So it started deepening those relationships and creating those experiences for the clients that weren't in their geographical area. So virtual events still have a place if the client would like to participate in a virtual social event, a virtual educational event. There's also a component if you do a live event, now we have the ability or the knowledge to stream it. So you can do both. It really depends who you're trying to reach, how they want to be reached, and what they like.
I'm curious, part of our approach, back to your point about what do your clients want, we have a philosophy that says just make your clients the voice. You're not marketing to yourself. Ask your
Right.
clients, what are they interested in? What are their unmet needs? And we're all familiar with form in terms of understanding client aspirations. So is part of your process to ask your client, ask a financial advisor, ask their clients, we're just simply saying, look, we want to do some events. We want to make them interesting and compelling. Are there any themes that you'd like to see? Is that part of your approach?
Absolutely.
Yes.
We believe in this philosophy, quite honestly, of ask. Excuse me.
And it can be
Um,
in any different form. Sorry, I know you were wanted to jump in there. It could be in any different form. It can be in the review meetings. It could be at an event. Hey, we're looking to do more of these. Here's some ideas we've been thinking of. Do they interest you? You can actually hold an event to collect event ideas. We've done that before too. So what we do is we practice what we preach. We meet our clients where they're at. They might have an event calendar already. They might already be in process of doing an event and need to amplify it a bit and add the strategic component to it. So we jump in where we need to, either from the very beginning, let's look at your ideal client, let's look at your database and segment it, to, okay, let's put the strategic ROM wheel to this event.
I'm assuming that if a financial professional is onboarding a brand new client and they're setting the expectation and future pacing what it looks like to be our client, they can say, hey, part of our client experience is we host client events. Here's a listing. Here's our event calendar. And if you go to our website, you can see all the different themes of the events that we're doing. We love crowdsourcing ideas. So if you have any ideas, please let us know. And of course, as we interact with you through our client experience and touch points, we'll remind you about the events that are coming up and invite you if you're interested. That's got to land in a way that validates for a new client, hey, I made the right choice.
absolutely. And it's empowering, right? You're allowing people to drive their own destiny in this relationship. So it's not just, and I know people hopefully wouldn't be so crass as to say, yeah, just give me your money. We're all good. This is a relationship. It's something that builds over time. And as much as an advisor wants to know their clients' financial goals, knowing what their interests are, knowing what we refer to a lot in the psychographics, who they are, how they think, really also blends into this trend of behavioral finance. What's important to them? They're saying they want one thing, but they may not know how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And by getting to know them better, you're going to be able to help them be successful.
Well, that's the thing about the enlightened financial professional and the team is they understand they're managing three things. They're managing money. That's becoming very commoditized. It's not to be trivialized, but it has to be supplemented because you're also managing a business and making sure that the business serves your life, not the other way around, but also ensuring that the way you manage your business creates professional contrast. And then you're managing people and you're managing how they perceive you, how they describe you. This is where competitor proofing is born. This is where you get out in front of money in motion. And this is where you create advocacy. So I have to think that that's another reason why events are so important. Now, let's get a little bit more granular. What specifically are you seeing that's working in terms of themes and things that are just like absolute home runs in terms of events, whether they're small, medium, large? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I think you can't discount size because what we are finding as we are talking to our clients, ideal clients, they are looking for smaller events.
Micro events.
So I think size does matter in this particular vein. I think, again, experience, you alluded to this earlier, but diving into this, a client event isn't just about education. And the event is, again, to build this and deepen this relationship. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, we're hosting a dinner and I'm going to get up and speak about retirement funds. And then people are all going to walk away with a coffee mug with my firm's logo on it. There may be a segment who is looking for education, but it's got to be edutainment is a word that happens a lot in the event world. as long as they are open to that. So that is definitely a trend. And also the trend is being creative in how to do events. Not every event has to be a $50,000 event. Not every event has to involve alcohol. Not every event has to be one and done. It could be a series. We have some clients where they've done some smaller events and they've taken them on the road. So you can do sort of like a heat map of your clients or the people. I don't want to say top clients, the people you want to deepen relationships with. Where are they physically? And we have one advisor and he's located in one place, but he's got this pocket of clients 550 miles away. And we're like, take the event that you're doing in your home base and take it down to those clients. So those are sort of some of the trends that we're seeing and that we're encouraging our clients to undertake.
I like that. And it's interesting. I noticed a long time ago when people would talk about a social event, a party, right? Maybe it's got an 80s theme or a wedding or whatever the case may be. The number one thing that people would often talk about is how many people were there. Obviously, speaking to the energy, the popularity, and that's fine. From a professional perspective, I learned a long time ago that it is, in fact, more important to reach people who count than it is to count the number of people you're reaching. So the how many, I
Absolutely.
mean, that's fine, but who's there and to what end, right? So the 20%, the most deserving clients, the ideal client, based on the law of environment, they'll typically hang out with, live near, work with, and refer people pretty much like themselves. So the micro event with the right theme got to be something to consider. And then just the pattern of regularity, not just one a year, but maybe getting into a stream of various events, probably a good idea. I'm curious, a couple of things. First of all, are you seeing advisors do events where they engage strategic partners, other service providers that they interact with, CPAs, attorney, and other fee for service professionals? Is that a thing?
Absolutely. And I'll speak to that. I've been writing some notes, all kinds of ideas for different types of events that we can bring up here in a little bit. But your events don't have to just be for your clients, they need to be in sync with your business goals. And for some advisors, their business goals may be to deepen relationships with their COIs. And the COIs typically are CPAs and attorneys, but it really can be any business that shares the same ideal client. In some instances, when we've done really deep into the marketing plan for advisors, it could be a high-end jeweler, a real estate professional, anyone that shares that same client. And then to build those relationships, we've worked with advisors who have done lunch and learns for CPAs and attorneys and brought in a wholesaler who has a CE credited course. So the CPAs and attorneys can earn their CE credits and have a nice lunch, build those relationships, and really start those conversations. We were working with an advisor not too long ago that wanted to do a big event at his country club for his top COI partners. And we created this really nice event from the invitation to walking in the door to the presentation to build the community of everyone else that was in the room. So it wasn't just about the advisory firm and that specific strategic partner. They're all starting to get to know each other and see how they can support each other to when they actually left. So it was, and of course, as we speak to the follow up. So it's this full circle event that really had the goal to deepen those COI relationships.
Okay, that's excellent. It's interesting. I had a conversation not long ago with an advisor. We were talking about client events, and the team was very excited about non-financial events. So interests, aspirations, hobbies,
Mhm.
things like that. The lead advisor was very quiet. And then he finally chimed in and he said, we're trying to grow up market. I want to be taken seriously. You want me to do an event on pickleball and golf and wine tasting. Yeah, okay, I get it. But at the end of the day, I do manage their money. And so the pendulum swung way over to technical ability. And I said, find the sweet spot. Perhaps you do live events for the fun stuff, but if you don't want to be conspicuous in the absence of technical ability, do offer virtual events on the core competency piece and just find that groove. And what's interesting, there are people, I'm very biased and partial, there are people in the financial services space that are incredibly informative and compelling. Brian Westbury, Bob Stein, Bob Carey, Strider Elas. These are all part of the economics team at First Trust. Most people know that I'm a big fan of that firm. I adore the people within that firm. You can do a digital event and bring in an authority. Bring in, and I know you're big on supplementing with wholesalers as well, to speak to the audience that craves insights about trends in the industry and geopolitical forces and things like that. How do you feel about finding that sweet spot between the digital, the virtual, and the in-person with some compelling elements? Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And again, it boils down to what the client is looking for. Are they looking for all in-person events? Are they looking for virtual events? Because while the advisor may want to supplement, do in-person and virtual, if the ideal attendee would rather be in person, they're not going to log on to the Zoom. They're not going to attend. So it really has to come down to what's their interest in the format of the event. And it's simple. Just simply ask, we're looking to put together an educational series. We're looking to do it virtually. Is this something that you'd be interested in? And if they say yes, absolutely, great. They'll have an idea of the makeup of the client if they work. Is it an evening event? Is it a morning event? But some may say prefer to attend in person. So it's collecting that data and building that sweet spot. And it really has to be per firm, per advisor, because every client base is different.
Okay, that's good. I'm
May I-
curious.
Oh,
May I
Elyse has
add
a thought.
something?
Of course.
May I add something? I love the idea of the virtual webinar also as a marketing tool for a discovery point of view. So I totally agree with everything that Angela has said. However, if, like in the case of your client that you just spoke about, Duncan, if they're feeling like they need their technical advice out into the world, then perhaps doing a webinar where, again, we're talking about our measurables. We're not necessarily measuring who's logging on at that particular moment, but we're doing a webinar that is then going to be recorded that can live on a YouTube channel,
Right.
on a website, that quite honestly, a client or a prospective client can find in their own journey to validate or inform their opinion of that advisor or that firm.
Very good point. And that's exactly where I was going to go, is that it's not just that they have to consume the information, just the invitation sparks interest, gets attention, both for an existing client, a prospective client, a strategic partner. It just shows the energy and the vibrance of the team's efforts. And it's funny you should say that, because I know a financial advisor who did an event, if I remember correctly, that focused on continuity and succession, family investment legacy for business owners. Brought in an authority, good little event, well received. And the speaker gave the advisor permission to create a summary of what was covered. And that summary, that white paper, was then submitted as a follow-up saying, did you miss it? We did this event, you couldn't attend, we have the next best thing, we've summarized it. That got incredible traction and actually was a Trojan horse for introductions within family trees. So this notion of a financial professional expanding into the realm of intellectual property in terms of capturing thought leadership in the form of events, converting to content, just gives it incredible shelf life down the road. So I really like that. I'm curious on that same point, like we've seen clients do cute themes like financial planning to a T, and it would be held at a golf course. And after the event, they'd have a swing coach go out in the range, and that would be very targeted. So it again walked the line between technical that allowed them to get some sponsorship, but then they added an element of fun. But the invitation had some lumpy mail. They put a golf tee in the envelope to get someone's attention. And then the follow-up to that was for the people who weren't into golf, but maybe to your point about targeting a different segment of the client base, they did a follow-up called Financial Planning to a T, but the theme was actual tea, teas of the world. And the lumpy mail in that invitation was what was the word? Sachet or a little thing that held really nice loose leaf tea. That was the lumpy mail. Thoughts on just adding some energy and some sizzle to the process? Is that part of your repertoire as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Duncan. So I love those ideas. They are meeting the client where they want to be met. They're bridging the gap between social and educational. We've done health, wealth, women, and wine. Wine seems to be a common thing. You don't have to do the one, but health, wealth, women, and wine, where you're talking about health, longevity. Maybe there's a motivational speaker, a book that's given away, wealth, how that ties into it all. The women, that particular event was what that niche was, what the focus was. And of course, wine just ties it all into the social piece. The tea example is a great one. Really combining, you can certainly do that. We have an advisor who's working on a women's retreat that is a half a day, and it's going to combine spiritual, financial, health, community. So there's, as they say, the world's your oyster. You can really combine it and develop it however your community and your clients want. I mean, there's really no edge. I mean, you can be creative. One thing that we were talking about trends a few minutes ago is legacy planning. That ties into the emotional aspect of your relationship with the client and the client with their family. And that can also help bridge the gap with just generational planning. Is create an event that has to do around legacy planning. Maybe there's an educational piece to it. Maybe there's a breakout session for love letters, writing a letter that you can tuck away. There's all kinds of creative ideas out there to bridge the gap between social and education.
Another one that I really loved was back to your point about being very targeted. What does the client want? This is an advisor who had a number of clients that were retired, really enjoying their lives, slowing things down. And the advisor did an event called Tulip Mania. And it was in the spring, brought in what he called a gardening nerd, somebody who knew a lot about gardening. And the advisor tied it in with the historical elements of the tulip bulb, which, if I remember correctly, is from the word turban, and talked about the financial episode known as Tulip Mania that came out of the Netherlands hundreds of years ago, and to the point where a tulip bulb was worth the equivalent of a small home, and it was just a bubble. So it was interesting. So the clients loved it because, and by the way, one of the takeaways after the event that gave it some shelf life and something to talk about is everybody got a little package of tulip bulbs.
Perfect.
So it was very interesting, very compelling, the sweet spot between technical ability, historical perspectives, cycles of the investing world, but also understanding tulip bulbs, that was a home run. And I love the idea, first of all, the impact with the lumpy mail and the invite, but the shelf life of something that's a takeaway, whether it's a swag bag. I know a financial advisor that did, in fact, bring in a 5.0 pickleball to do an introduction to pickleball for some clients. They had to sign a waiver, of course, because of potential injuries, but everybody left, got a keychain that had a mini pickleball on it.
Yep.
And I think that cost $6 or $7. I'm not saying get in the gift giving business, but when that advisor saw clients show up for meetings 6 months later and on their keychain was the little pickleball key fob, you just knew that it just extends, and everything tangible triggers a moment of recognition and appreciation for the relationship. Again, I'm not saying get in the gift giving business, but there are so much of this industry is so virtual. And Angela, this from back in the day working with Ralph, that you sometimes want to go from vapor to paper, something you can hold in your hands to really galvanize the relationship, to make it high touch, not just high tech. Yeah. Okay. So what's new? Events are new again. You've got, I'm sure on your website, which is at event-advisors.net, you've got some ideas and some resources there around what's new and what's working. Where's it all going? What's next? What's coming? What are you seeing in terms of as the event landscape evolves? Do you have any insights on that to just stoke someone's enthusiasm about getting excited about embedding events into their client experience?
I think you touched on it a little bit. We're living in this time of technology. I love that phrase of, was it high vapor and high touch? I think even though there's what's new is working to balance the two. We know that next gen clients are digital and they're digitally savvy. And we know that people are busy. So figuring out how do we do events? How do we do a successful events that kind of tie all of those things in? So I'd say what's new and what's coming is some creativity and how you use technology in your events. And that technology can be anything from AI. I know it's two of the hottest letters out there right now for event planning, for your follow up, what that's all going to look like and help you. I heard a great phrase. I'm just going to throw this out there. Someone was talking about AI on a webinar I was on the other day, and they said, I think of AI as my intern, that person who can help me get some stuff done, but I'm not necessarily saying, you're my marketing director, go and do it. So it's using it to help you get started. So as event marketers, we're not saying, oh, go to AI and they'll plan your entire event, but it might help you give some words to what your ideal client might be thinking that you can then prove by actually talking to your ideal clients. So using technology, I went to an event a couple of weeks ago. It was not a financial advisor event, but it was one of these indoor mini golf courses. I don't know if you've been to one of those, Duncan.
Yeah.
Very technology driven. It's still mini golf, but it was cool. It had technology in like where your ball was going. There was one hole where there was a trivia question that came up on a TV screen, and it was a true or false question. And you had to hit your golf ball to the true lane or the false lane, and you got like bonus points. A little different than regular golf, where the idea was to have a lot of points. Is that something that people could be doing, saying, my people like golf? Maybe we can tie technology into that somehow. So that is definitely something that we're seeing. Angela, what else are you seeing?
So what we're seeing, it's not a new concept, but it's new because the advisors and for that matter, wholesalers and broker dealers are really embracing it, is working with your strategic partners, becoming the company that's providing the value. So I'll give an example from an advisor perspective. So advisors developing their relationships with their wholesalers. Wholesalers can be a really beneficial relationship I know many are probably thinking, oh my gosh, they keep calling my office. I ignore them. I can't be bothered. I'm doing my day job. But embrace the relationship of your wholesalers as an advisor. And if you are a wholesaler, embrace the relationship of your strategic partners, your product partners, because these firms can provide product knowledge. They can provide presentation content for you. So you're coming in as the host, bringing in an expert. And it can be, it doesn't have to just be educational, like you had mentioned, Duncan. It could be you're bringing in a pickleball expert. You're bringing in a cigar connoisseur, a wine sommelier, um, somebody in regards to legacy planning. There's no cap on the type of experts you can bring in, but the wholesalers have that product knowledge. They have the presentation content. They can speak and or bring in speakers. They also can provide financial support, which is another piece to how am I going to pay for all these events? These sound great, but I don't have the budget for it. So partner with them and there's financial support there. And there's also industry knowledge. So your product partners, your wholesalers, your strategic partners, they're working out there in the field. They're seeing what's going on, good and bad, and can bring some of these ideas and the creativity to you to really help you not reinvent the wheel and figure out some ideas that are great for your practice.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
I have to say, I remember vividly when my wife was telling our kids that she was heading out to book club. And one of my kids said, "Oh, do you mean wine club?" A very funny moment. But I do know financial professionals who have done thematic book clubs,
Yeah.
especially around travel. Let's talk about a book on the Amalfi Coast. Let's talk about a book on South Africa or whatever the case may be. And that was well received because it was very inclusive, very engaging, but also very targeted. You mentioned AI. I know advisors that are really engaging in the family trees of their clients using creating content and brief pseudo events, speaking to kids about sound financial strategies and aspirations. And again, that's evergreen content that lasts and lives and can be pushed to go viral within a family tree. Other things to think about. The golf, the top golf, and again, engaging a wholesaler. If you just give, if it's win-win, if you give a wholesaler 10 or 15 minutes just to talk about what's going on in their world and then pivot over to the golf experience, it's win-win. And there's subsidization opportunities. Same with pickleball at some of these pickleball facilities. Just bring somebody in so that you cover both sides, the fun and the edutainment element. There's all kinds of ideas. I just want everybody to just again expand their thinking about efficient, interesting, one-to-many events. In our books, we cover client advisory councils, ideal client events, and just think about the impact an invitation alone has, the impact of creating content that lasts long after the event, and where that can go in terms of creating introductions, and just also making the business fun again. It's easy to get bogged down with the noise, but sometimes you just detach and get together with some like-minded people. It's just, oh yeah, this is why I became a financial advisor. I like people and I like helping them achieve their goals. Lots to consider there. So where can everybody find you? I know there's their website, www.event-advisors.net. That's a good place to start. I know you've got some resources there that people can use to just get their wheels in motion. I know you're active on LinkedIn. What can people look for? How can they reach you?
They can, like you said, the website. We do have a business page on LinkedIn, Event Advisors. Angela and I both have individual LinkedIn where we share. I'm a big analogy fan. So you'll be able to tell when you come to our business page, which are my posts, just trying to make this event thing less perplexing so that there can be success. On our website, we do have we've just launched are called Valuable Views. It's a Q&A with E&A. And each month we answer questions about events, event ideas, value of events. And then we also have a YouTube channel, which we're building out. So you'll be able to see videos like this linked into our YouTube channel as well.
Okay, excellent. And if I'm on a financial services team and I just want to kick your tires, could I actually have a conversation with you just to see if our interests align and what I'm trying to accomplish is in sync with what you guys provide? Is that something available as well?
Absolutely. Our email is hello@event-advisors.net. Drop us a note, DM us on LinkedIn. We're there all the time, and we can certainly set up an opportunity. And we have some resources, maybe for people who aren't really sure what questions they want to ask. We have a emergency kit checklist. So when people are doing events, you should always have an emergency kit. So we've compiled all of our favorite things that at some point one or both of us has gone, oh my God, I really wish I had this. And then we also have a document that people can use if they're planning events to think about what we call the event personality. What type of event? Again, it's based on this ideal client. And that's a great resource that we love to share with folks as well.
And we're continuously creating tools and checklists just from our years of experience, bringing things from our head out into the world. The website is a great place to keep an eye on those announcements, LinkedIn business page, because we're always announcing new things, having webinars, workshops, new tools.
We love to talk about events, as you can tell. So we love having conversations and brainstorming.
Just your email. I was just going to say, just your email, hello@eventadvisors.net. That's inviting in and of itself, very non-threatening. And yeah, I like the idea of just demystifying and just having people not start from scratch and reinvent the wheel. Like just put them in the red zone and let them see it through and see the results, the qualitative feedback, the quantitative impact. That's very powerful. I appreciate that. We'll have to do this again and do a little bit of a before and after. You can talk about specific sort of in the lab. Here's an advisor. They didn't do events and now they do events and this is the outcome. That would be great. But I really appreciate your insights and let's stay in touch. I'll see you on LinkedIn real soon, I'm sure. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Always On with Duncan MacPherson, where our objective is to enable professionals to always be working on their business and on themselves. Want to learn more about Duncan and his team? Visit ParetoSystems.com. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests, and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Pareto Systems. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.